Step 6 for recovering from an infidelity or betrayal is called identifying vulnerabilities. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we basically need to understand why it happened. And in the infidelity research, it also shows that it's important for couples to come to what is called understanding the meaning of the affair, right? And there's a couple of elements to that, but, well, how do you understand the meaning of an affair? Well, you need to understand what led to it in the first place. John Gottman describes this as basically a cascade towards betrayal. And he says it begins from one of the other elements of the relationship house called turning towards versus turning away. And that means we're not connecting either verbally, emotionally, physically. We're turning away from each other too much, and understanding that there's probably something that's happened during the course of the relationship where needs have not been met. This is the reason that I give couples the emotional needs questionnaire, which is not just about emotional needs. It's about spending time together, having fun, openness and honesty, sexual fulfillment, affection, admiration, a whole range of things, right? So we need to understand, was that part of the reason that the affair happened? Now, I've had couples where the person who's been betrayed readily accepts that that is part of why it happened. I had a couple many, many years ago who came to see me, again, been together 20 years, grown children or about to leave the home. And when they came in and said that the husband had gone on a work trip, and there'd been a woman that had been trying to sort of get his attention for a long time, and then they happened to be in the same city at the same time, and there was alcohol involved, and they ended up sleeping together. Now, this was purely a once-off thing that had happened, and when they came in, the wife said, "I'm very angry, I'm very upset, I'm very betrayed, but I do understand why it happened, because there'd been no physical intimacy in their relationship for years, not weeks, not months, years. And there were reasons that had happened, and they had both just taken their eye off the ball and thought that they could keep going without something happening." This is a big problem that I see a lot of the times, is people thinking that we're too busy, we've got work, we don't have time, we're too tired, we have the kids are young, we'll wait till they're older, we'll wait till they leave the house. No, you will get divorced. Someone's going to cheat. You need to deal with this. And you also need to understand what your priorities should be in a relationship, right? Particularly when you start to have children, okay? It's not that we are now first and foremost parents, and then we are romantic couple. That is going to cause a problem eventually. You are first and foremost a romantic couple, and then you are parents. And if you don't keep it in that order, something is going to give at some point. It's important for a couple to be able to talk it through, and I try and work with them to understand what were the relationship vulnerabilities, for example. Now, let's say that a couple comes in and the person who's been betrayed is completely gobsmacked, shocked, and they say, everything was great. We have a great relationship. We never argue, or if we do, it's not particularly bad. We're having sex, intimacy is good, and this still happened. Then I would say there's probably something that the person who has betrayed, there's a vulnerability in that person, and the person needs to work out what it is. Sometimes it's to do with their upbringing. Sometimes it's to do with their first interactions with the opposite sex or the same sex. Basically, there is something inside of them that the infidelity or the affair was trying to resolve. And it could be something like, I'm not good enough, and I'm not attractive, and I need to prove to myself that I am attractive to other people in the world. It could be a whole range of things which are obviously connected to self-esteem and ego. And there can be other reasons, like I had a couple where it was they had only just got married, they were quite young, and she ended up having an affair, right? It was a very brief affair, and it involved a bit of an emotional and a very small amount of physical. And she was genuinely upset and sad that it had happened, and she showed genuine remorse. She also went into her own therapy to understand, why did she let that happen? What was it? And she had to dig deep into her past and her history, because her husband was only ever going to feel comfortable, and this is the same for all infidelities, if the person who's done the betraying is been able to self-reflect and understand their vulnerabilities. What situations do they put themselves in potentially that could lead to something like this happening? And what stops them? I mean, what doesn't stop them? Why do they not stop at that point? So that is the next step, is identifying either relationship vulnerabilities or individual vulnerabilities and closing those gaps. The seventh step to recovering from infidelity or betrayal is what I call reconnect and rebuild. Now, this relates to, in terms of John Gottman's relationship house, it relates to the first 3 levels of your relationship house. And the first 3 levels are mostly about your friendship and your connection to each other. When a couple comes in and they're in trouble for whatever the reason is, not just infidelity or trust, whatever the reason is, we don't say, let's fix your sex life, right? Because we know that that's not going to happen. Unless the only problem they have is the sex life, in which case, sure, we can deal with it as a sex therapy issue. But usually what we need to do is begin at friendship and connection. And so that means that, and I've specifically put this as a second to last step in how to recover from an affair, because you're only going to be able to start to reconnect and rebuild after you've done the other steps, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't do it all along. I'm not saying that, you know, in the early stages, you shouldn't be going out and having dinner together and having enjoyable activities. You must do those things, but you've really got to pick it up once you've dealt with some of these other steps. And that really requires almost getting to know each other again, right? The reason sometimes people end up splitting up or drifting apart or having an affair is, it's because they've drifted apart. It's because they haven't been talking to each other, and what John Gottman describes as love maps, they haven't updated the map, right? And the map is the mental understanding of your partner's world. How well do you really know your partner? And anyone who's been through an infidelity would say, I thought I knew my partner, right? So there's an absolute imperative for a couple going through who's been through an affair to reconnect and start to enjoy each other's company again and talk. But even more than that, there needs to be a level of transparency and openness that I would call radical honesty needs to show up. So you've got to be saying things that you normally didn't say because you didn't want to upset them. If you don't say that after an affair, it's not going to be good at all. So the reconnecting part is that you need to go back to kind of dating each other, asking questions about what is important to you right now. What do you want from your life? Where are we going? And it's almost like you re-establish the goals of the relationship. And that obviously necessarily means there needs to be a genuine desire to recommit to each other. If it's not there, it's not going to happen, right? So again, it comes to the commitment wall. And so that leads to the final step in recovering from betrayal or infidelity. And I call that, a need for consistent demonstration of changed behaviors. So as I say it right at the beginning, the old relationship and the old way of relating to each other and the old way of being prior to the affair, our relationship prior to the affair is dead. It's over, right? We bury it because we'll never have that relationship again, and we probably don't want it. What we want is something better. And that means we have to commit to different behaviors. Now, there's going to be different behaviors in terms of rebuilding trust, but there's also going to be a requirement, a need for different behaviors from both partners. The biggest mistake that a couple can make after an affair is focusing only on the person who has done the betraying, and that they are the problem and they are at fault, and that moving forward, they no longer have a right to be upset about anything the other person does, right? That is a recipe for disaster. I saw that in another couple where there was an infidelity 10 years before. They didn't deal with it. And the partner who done the betraying then became second-class citizen in the marriage and in the family, didn't have a voice about even the smallest things, because it was very easy to bring out the infidelity card, right? Nothing you can say or do nothing I can say or do as the person who was betrayed could be worse than what you did to me, so shut up, right? Excuse the language, but sometimes these things get emotional. And as you can see, I'm quite passionate about this topic. So what needs to happen is, if you look back to, and we've come full circle in John Gottman's relationship house to the pillars of trust and commitment, right? So what this can also represent is, if we commit to new behaviors, and for example, we commit to do something different. I commit to tell you that if I'm going to be home at a certain time and then I can't make it at that time, that I will text you, I'll call you and tell you when I'm going to be, and then you don't do it, and the phone's off. You break the trust, right? You break the trust. Every time you say you're going to do a different behavior and you don't do it, you break the trust again, and that causes setbacks. But on the positive side of that, if the person who has betrayed commits to doing things in a different way and they consistently follow through, that trust will get rebuilt. It will get rebuilt. So really what we're needing in that final step from both people, whatever it is that the person who's been betrayed and just basically both of them have discovered wasn't working and wasn't going well, whatever changes that they agree to start to do must be followed through consistently over time, and that will rebuild the trust between them. And so there you have the 8 steps to recovering from infidelity. I hope you've enjoyed the video and that you've got a benefit out of it. And if you think there's somebody you know who might benefit, please do forward it on to them. And look forward to seeing you guys, or you could see me in the next video.